Right. I trust you all had a good lunch break and are all filled and are looking forward with curious minds as to what our global heads have to share with you with our forthcoming topics. Yes? That's a very resounding yes. Let's try that one more time, shall we? Are we all looking forward with a curious mind for this global investor meet where we together are reimagining growth? Yes? That's a lot better. All right, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Now, as promised, we have a very intriguing session coming up. And to do the honors and introduce to you our speaker for this particular session, please allow me the honor and privilege of welcoming back on stage the founder and CEO of Ink Talks with a round of applause. Please join me in welcoming Ms. Lakshmi Praturi.
Hi. Did you have a good lunch? So you have a lot of energy? Okay, can you clap really loud for all our great people who have come from all over the world? So in the next session is a combination of a talk and an interview. And what we wanted to talk to you about design in a very, very different way. So it's about how do we design games? How do we design experiences? How do we design outcomes? How do we design our own being? And so there is an academic, and then we have someone who works in the world of design. So what we are going to do is we have a talk first, and then I'll be interviewing Yvonne. So that's how this session is designed. So one of the great privileges I have as the founder of Ink, which stands for Innovation and Knowledge, is that we get to find amazing people from all over the world and bring them to India. And our purpose is best of rest of the world to India and best of India to the rest of the world. So we find these amazing. So our next speaker is somebody I met a few years ago when she was at UC San Diego. Now she's at Northeastern. And the thing, Leanne Chukowski is the next speaker. And the thing that's unique about Leanne's work is that she uses technology to make a difference in people's lives. When I first met her, she was doing a lot of work on autistic children and how they work with gaming. Now she's doing a lot of work on how do we make, things that we really keep trying to avoid, how do you make them fun? So the conversation that we will have next, actually the presentation Leanne is going to be, is truly about how do we use technology to not really alter behavior, but maybe better our behavior. So with that, Leanne.
Can't hear me? Oh, I think you can hear me now. Good afternoon, and thank you so much for the kind invitation. I'm delighted to be here today. I'd like to start with my first slide. And invite you to take a moment to consider in your past when there was a special teacher, a mentor, someone who gave you a start early in your education or supported you early in your career. Think about what that person meant for you, how they saw you, what that did for you as you took your first steps upon your career and your education. You got that in your minds? Yeah? Hopefully you've had a fond experience there. I certainly have. I've had multiple dear mentors who've guided me on my path. But what I want to talk to you about today is that not everyone is quite so fortunate. Their educational paths tend to be a bit more fraught, and they have more struggles with finding that guidance, that mentorship that's going to lead them into positive places early in their career where they can make an impact. And the folks I'm going to talk about today have much to contribute and great impact to make. In particular, I'm going to talk about neurodiversity. When you think about neurodiversity, I'm not sure how familiar you are with the term, but often people think about the neurological disorders which are often collected under this term, such as autism, ADHD, dyslexia, and multiple other disorders. But I'd like you to consider for a moment that neurodiversity is more of a way that we as humans process information differently. We perceive the world differently when we have, in particular, we all perceive the world a little differently due to our experiences and how our brain grows and forms, but we particularly have different perceptual experiences, behavioral ways of engaging with the world when we have these conditions. And so neurodiversity is a term that refers to that, and it's more about the beauty of the differences among us and what that brings in our everyday engagements. And this is not a term that's infrequent. In fact, about 1 in 5 people have a neurodiverse condition, or would be called neurodivergent, right? And so bringing these different abilities and perspectives to bear. However, the early path in school and in early career can be really fraught when people are not understood, when these differences aren't supported and structured. So imagine a child in school who perhaps has sensory differences, who has some challenges, behaviors that are not understood. That child is not going to get the same kind of mentorship, recognizing those strengths in the way that one would hope to guide the child to bring their very best into the world, right? So in addition to sensory and behavioral differences, sometimes in school, you might have experienced those who behave differently are socially separate. They don't enjoy the benefit of friendships. Sometimes they're bullied, right? And this is the experience of many people who identify as neurodivergent. And again, 20% of us, 1 in 5. Yet, this is so important to get this early stage right. I'm going to take one example and give you data from individuals who are autistic. The data of individuals who've graduated from high school who are autistic are 85% of them are either unemployed or severely underemployed. 85%. That's a lot of talent missed. And so here we are at this wonderful stage celebrating innovation and growth, and I'm telling you that we're missing some incredible talent. We're missing incredible talent because there are strengths that need to be brought forth, and some really common strengths. There are many, and again, there are differences among us, but some common strengths that are seen in individuals who are neurodivergent are exceptional pattern recognition in complex environments, in complex data, really intense hyper-focus for a long period of time on a task, computer programming, for example, data science. Very creative problem solving, extremely lateral thinking. These are all skills. These are the unique abilities that can enable both individuals and teams to work in ways that really challenge our thinking, our conventional thinking, and our ways of working. This is what we need in order to build the innovation that we seek in our companies. There are places where individuals who are neurodivergent thrive. For example, in the games industry. Perhaps this is not surprising. It's incredibly creative, right? And what we've found, even though this was somewhat obvious for people who spend time in games, I actually use games as part of my research, which I'll mention in a moment. But in 2022, there was a survey in the UK that went out to the gaming industry to examine diversity in that workforce. What they found is that 18% of the UK games industry identified as neurodivergent. Now, I'm going to remind you that that 18% did not include those who don't yet know that they're neurodivergent, because a lot of people come to this understanding about themselves when their children are diagnosed. Or perhaps they didn't want to put that bubble mark and say, yes, me too, right? 18%, that's very close to 1 in 5. So here in this industry, they are benefiting from this different way of thinking, this creativity. And I had the pleasure now 7 years ago to engage this. I was working on an intervention that involved games, and I got to see in the individuals who were signing up for my study the incredible creativity and the drive to design and actually write about games, to code games. And I developed an internship program that ran for 7 summers now and was funded by the United States National Science Foundation for 5 years. And what we did is work in groups where we were developing both hard and soft skills in small groups of 5 supported by a coach over the summer. And these individuals made really beautiful games that related to research problems, and the reviews after the fact were phenomenal. They gained a ton of skills. They felt more confident about work. They loved this environment where they were working with their peers who also identified as neurodivergent. That was fantastic. But in that 7 years, I realized that there are other things that are needed, and I'll come to that in a moment. But I first wanted to talk about those skills. I talked about the hard skills that they learned, but perhaps more importantly were the soft skills. The 4 C's, which maybe you've heard about, these soft skills that are 21st century skills. I'm talking about collaboration, communication, the ability to be creative, and for critical thinking. Those things we fostered through this internship program. And on this slide, I'm highlighting some data from the Burning Glass Institute that's showing you that in technical work that is considered hybrid, meaning more human involvement, those bars are shown in orange on the left. Those jobs that require these key soft skills are much more prevalent, right? They're more available than the other jobs that don't have these, right? So these jobs are more, they're more accessible. And if you look at the bar on your right, you'll see that those very hybridized jobs, those jobs that involve these soft skills, are also much less prone to automation, what's coming from AI. Not surprising, because the human is in the loop. We need to build these skills, and these skills require mentorship. When we get this right, the results can be amazing. Several large companies have recognized this talent that we're missing. For example, JP Chase and SAP have very large programs supporting neurodiversity. Here are some facts from JP Chase. Neurodivergent hires were 90 to 140% more productive than their neurotypical employees. It takes support. It takes the right environment. At SAP, they found that neurodivergent employees file patents at 10 times the rate of their neurotypical colleagues. I invite you to look at the references for these below. We are missing out on some exceptional talent because we don't have the systems in place to support their growth. So after this 7 years of internship where we had these wonderful, supportive, engaging internships, I realized we're missing, ironically, the diversity. We're missing the mix. What we need is a universal design perspective. We need to be blending together our neurodivergent and neurotypical students, bringing them together, helping them identify all of them, helping them identify their strengths, and learning to talk about those strengths, learning to use those strengths together to collaborate, to communicate, to foster their critical thinking, and to be creative. And if we get that right, I think we can do amazing things. I have the good fortune of being at Northeastern University, where we are in a position to do a lot of good here. So Northeastern has a global education system. We also have a 115-year running cooperative education program. It is the perfect place to invest in this kind of early, supportive, pre-work environment to get people, all people, people with different ways of thinking, ready for the world of work so that they thrive. I'll note that in our 300,000 alumni, there are a lot of them from India. So, to end, I invite you to come with me on this journey. What could you do with the young people in your lives who think differently, who could use a little extra support so that they can too get to the place of thriving, so that they too can contribute their best to the careers and to the innovation economy we all seek? Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together once again and let's give it up for Dr. Chukovsky. Thank you so much for taking the time and joining us out here and sharing with us your thoughts and opinions about neurodysfunction. It was brilliant listening to you. If I could request you to kindly join us on stage for a quick moment. Ms. Lakshmi, if I could request you to join us on stage and hand over a token of appreciation from the government of Karnataka for Dr. Chukovsky for having joined us out here and sharing with us her views. Thank you once again, Dr. Chukovsky, for joining us out here. Ms. Lakshmi, now I understand we have a rather interesting fireside chat that you're going to be conducting. So I leave the stage to you. Please lead the way.
So what we are going to do is I'm going to have a conversation with Yvonne, at the end of which I'll bring Leanne back up, and we can have a Q&A with the audience. So whatever questions you have, record them, and we'll come back in a second. Yvonne, we need one more chair. Sorry. Sorry, I apologize. Apologies for the little disorganization there. So instead of giving a long introduction, you'll get to know who Yvonne is as we talk to each other. So Yvonne, I met Yvonne a few months ago. She's the dean of the new school as well as the Parsons School of Design. And what we wanted to have a conversation about, Yvonne, is, as I was saying, about design. We are talking about design. Leanne talked about designing neurodiversity into our lives earlier and earlier. And you talk a lot about the importance of that diversity in the design school itself. So tell us a little bit about how in Parsons School right now, you have different types of design, but you also have technology, you also have biology, you have different things. So tell us a little bit about your philosophy of design?
Well, thank you for the question. And thank you to the audience for being here as well. One thing before I answer that question, I just wanted to say as well that we have a very high percentage of students, as Leanne just mentioned, at Northeastern. Equally, we do have a high percentage of students studying with us from various parts of India. It's our second highest country. So our three top countries are China, India, and South Korea. And then, of course, we have various others after that. But one thing that I see in terms of being here is the commitment to an investment of a design education at Parsons. And that is down to, I think, what we do incredibly well is we train for creativity. And design is obviously an integral part of that as a process. So, as Lakshmi said, I'm currently the Executive Dean at Parsons School of Design. And Parsons is made up of 5 schools. There is the School of Art, Design, History and Theory, the School of Art, Media and Technology, the School of Design Strategy, where actually that is one of the schools which has our business administration program, an undergrad BBA in strategic design and management, and a MS in strategic design and management. Both programs are programs that have high interest from students from India. We also have a design and technology program, undergrad and grad. So you get the theme. There's a lot of technology that is happening where we are. We also have the School of Constructed Environments, where we have architecture, undergrad and grad, industrial design grad, interior design undergrad and grad, product design, and I think I'm missing one, but anyway, you get the picture. That's our School of Constructed Environment. And then our last school is the School of Fashion. It probably is the school that is most well known by many people globally. Parsons School of Fashion. It graduated Donna Karan, Marc Jacobs, Proenza Shula, Isaac Mizrahi, Tom Ford was there for a while, Alexander Wang. So all of the kind of like luminaries of the fashion industry are also Parsons graduates. And then since I have been here as well, after I leave here, I'm heading to Delhi, where we will be hosting a small event for some of our alumni. And on arriving and engaging with one of our alums who is coordinating this event, I then come to find out that one of the best-known fashion designers, menswear, in India is a Parsons graduate. So there's something that we are doing.
Right.
We're doing it right, and we're doing it very well. And I believe a lot of that is down to the quality of our curriculum, which was very thoughtfully redesigned over a decade ago. Curriculum is something that is not static. I always think of and talk about curriculum as it's live, it's a living kind of fluid object. And what we do at Parsons is that is actually the cornerstone of design as well. It begins there. And what we do is we invest in ensuring that our curriculum is keeping up to date with current changes, whether that is environment, whether it is the world of design. We are making sure that we are fully engaged in the world of design so that we can actually really deliver that as a process to our students. So it is critical, it is important, and I think design is important for the world as well.
And I think, Yvonne, you said the key word that there's technology, there's design, there's biology, there is, all sorts of things are coming together. And you also have a sister school, which is a new school. So tell us a little bit about that and how the schools interoperate.
Yes, great. So yes, the part that is sometimes not as well known is that Parsons is part of the new school. We have different histories. Parsons has been around for over 100 years, and then various different parts of the new school have, they have different kinds of timelines. So the one that is probably the most well known is the New School for Social Research. It was the kind of original part of the new school that begun during the war period when German intellectuals were fleeing from Europe at that point, and they found a home at the new school. So our history begins there. We also have a College of Liberal Arts, which is Eugene Lang, where we have a really robust liberal arts programs, culture and media, all of the sciences is there as well. Interdisciplinary science, so we have a lot of kind of crossover and engagement with different parts of the new school. We have the School of Public Engagement, which we're actually going through a realignment process at the moment, where some of those programs are actually being integrated. So we will be integrating media studies, environmental policy and sustainability management, and then Milano management into Parsons. And then the last college that makes up the new school is the College of Performing Arts, again, which has a long and illustrious history, where, all of the luminaries in the School of Music and Jazz, if you imagine all of the great names in jazz, then either they taught at the new school or they have been contributors in different ways. So that's the whole of the landscape of what is the new school. Parsons is the biggest part of the new school, and we are around 5,000 students, a little over actually, about 5,467 students currently at Parsons. We're a 9,000 student body between the colleges of the new school and Parsons.
Yeah. When I worked in the technology industry in the 90s or so, design was seen as a luxury. It was more of, also we come from a very industrial revolution mindset of productivity, copy exactly, that kind of stuff, where design was seen as something that makes it cost more. So we are not sure we want to do it. And, whatever products we had, they lasted for 10 years, 20 years, etc. And now we are in a world where products are changing much faster, companies are changing much faster, and also the audience has shifted from just give me the cheapest thing to they're questioning, where is this from? Where is that from? Is this sustainable? Is it green? And what is the true cost? So the younger generation in the shared economy which we have right now, which is very different than the industrial economy, is asking very different questions. So something you said that's very important is that your curriculum is not static. It keeps changing. And so are the students, right? So if you think of the students that came 10 years ago who said, I want to become the Donna Karan, or I want to become the whatever, probably the new students are coming who don't have a role model yet in the sense, but there is a direction that they're going. What changes do you see in the student population, even in the last 5-6 years? Are the young people asking for something different? Are they behaving in a different way? So tell us about your 5,467, whatever the number of students you have. In what way they have changed? What are they demanding?
So you are correct. A decade ago, I think who we had as a student was somebody that differs in their, not necessarily their profile, because we still have students who arrive at Parsons. They are typically highly engaged, high GPA. Across Parsons, we have the highest GPA from most of the other colleges. And yeah, just generally highly engaged, interested in problem solving. But what has shifted, and it was interesting because I started to kind of catch this about a decade ago. And I remember there was a point, at this point, I was, I omitted to say that I'm an associate professor in the School of Fashion. And when I first came to Parsons, my role was in the School of Fashion as the Director of Academic Affairs. So it was very much to look at and take care of the curriculum. But I noticed something about a group of students who would have been, they probably arrived around 2011. They were about 2014 graduates. What I noticed about them then was they were very interested in community. And it was really a day one phenomenon. Like when they first arrived and we did an orientation project, the level of kind of cooperation that I noticed and saw amongst them felt quite different. And then I was tracking them for a period of time, and I had students in courses that I was teaching as well. And around that time, I had developed a course called Fashion Materiality. It was pretty early on in my time there, and what I noticed was we had a lot of students who were really engaged with material processes, even though we did not have a formal textile program or a material making program. So they were finding stuff somewhere. And in this particular course, and it was my the first time that I taught it, I ended up with a group of students, John Maxgo, who was a sophomore, Carmen Gamma, Tez Dowd, Jack, who went on to become one of our part-time faculty, and one other student. Her name will come to me in a moment. So I had this group of like really kind of intriguing. It was a bigger class, but those were there were 6 of them that stood out, and we did a project which was around sustainability. And we were doing that project with one of my teaching partners, who was Timo Riisanen, who was our first professor of sustainability. And we were following the work of Kate Fletcher, who's been doing a lot of work, decades of work now around fashion and sustainability. These students, first of all, they came up with really great products. But it was more than that. It was how they engaged with each other, their processes, and just their thinking. And it was noticeable that these were people like, they were out, we're going to change the world.
Yeah.
And I kept calling them, oh, you're my change makers.
Yeah.
And then Tez, Carmen, and her name will come to me in a minute, went on to become fellows at Eileen Fisher, the fashion sustainability brand. The first time that she had had fellows for a year-long program. Mm-hmm. They've all now gone into working in different areas. So Tez moved to Australia, is working in fashion and sustainability. Carmen Gamma is still working at Eileen Fisher and doing a lot of work around changing the supply chain. And the other student actually created her own brand called Fafora, which is a brand that works with fashion and disability. And so she had created, through problem solving, solutions for people who are wheelchair bound.
Wheelchair, yes. What's her name? Sophie, was it Sophie?
No, it's not Sophie, and
okay.
she will kill me for not remembering, but I will remember it shortly. but yeah, so she created a cup holder and several other products. But what I began to notice over a period of time was students themselves were changing. We were not. We turn up every day. We teach the same subjects. They were the ones who had changed. And what they are motivated by now is certainly making a difference.
Yeah.
They have a strong social justice base, are interested and engaged with environment, climate, justice generally across the world. They are engaged in community. They are, they want to be community. They want to create those spaces where they gather and support and be in communication and communion and community with each other. They are less bothered about hierarchy. They are less bothered about, you know, the teacher at the front of the room being the important person and the font of all knowledge, but they are engaged in how do we be collaborators? How do we kind of create partnership in a classroom rather than, you know, I'm the teacher up here and you are the lowly student down here. They have a view, they have a point of view, they have a perspective, and they want us to be engaged with them from that
You know,
place.
it's like one of my most favorite sayings is that there's a Native American saying that says that we do not live on a land that we inherit from our ancestors, but our land we are borrowing from our children. And we've made a pretty messy job of our children's land. And the way they are demanding what they want, something different, is amazing. So if you think about, you know, today we have a lot more computing power than ever before. We have a lot more privilege than ever before. We have a lot more machines than ever before. And actually, we were talking about, like, in the planes, they used to design, you know, things to move mechanically. Now, with, you know, people can do it by eye tracking, you know, moving things through eye tracking, etc. So tell us a little bit about this whole human-centered design. That's the big thing we are talking about today. It's not just about designing the perfect nozzle, but how are you using it, either a user interface or so. So tell me a little bit about how the design world is evolving to nurture that human-centered design.
Yeah, I think trends obviously go in waves, and I still believe that we have, you know, a kind of like a debt of gratitude to Steve Jobs.
Yes, yeah.
So I think he completely shifted the context for, you know, the sensitivity around how we use products. I don't think people were thinking or talking about product development in the same way.
Yeah.
And so we have a generation who, they are digital natives. They think about the tool in their hand more so than maybe some of the kind of like typical analog skills. So I think that has altered the ways in which we, you know, think about and integrate design. So that shift has happened, and I think for that group of student as a generation, human-centered design is not a thing that they have to add on or consider as an afterthought. It's primarily the first way in which they work and think.
Yeah, and I think it's really important when you bring Steve Jobs, or maybe a bigger thing of how industry has to adopt design. I remember, like, in the late 90s, I saw this pinching technology, you know, like how we do the thing now. And I saw that, I said, wow, it's so interesting, but how would anybody use it? I mean, I couldn't think. But when iPhone came, you know, the feature to do this and this was the, you know, intuitive thing, to the point that I, who have become an entrepreneur in my 50s, you know, when I'm reading something, I try to do this sometime, and I realize that it's a text, you know, you can't do it. But I think there is an amazing thing about
how the industry adopts it and put it in the consumer hands.
Yeah.
So in what way do your students, your designers, work actually with the people from industry to be able to make that transition?
Yeah, thank you. That is an excellent question. As you were posing that question, it was I was starting to think about things that we have been working on. And just to step back a moment, the student's name that I was grasping for is Lucy Jones. And so her product brand is called Fofora, F-F-O-R-A, if you'd like to Google that. Project that I'm thinking about that we engaged in very recently, we did a project with a brand, a jewelry brand called, it's a large, huge organization called Signet Jewelry.
Yeah.
They came to us because what they were looking at was the ways in which, of course, so much has changed post-COVID. But how do people choose, important items of jewelry? An engagement ring. And so they actually worked with our students in the School of Design Strategies to do some research in relation to that, and how, if you were shopping online, what kinds of things would you want to engage with, and how would you engage? They've already started to do a lot of research as well in understanding the motivation of this as a generation as well. So how do you work with lab-grown diamonds? How do you ensure that you have a narrative around blood diamonds as well? Because these are all things as well that the students are interested in. So I think this is a great example of a brand coming to us, and they have a number of jewelry stores that are kind of well known on the high street. The one that I know of in the UK is H. Samuel, so it's like mid-range jewelry for the everyday kind of customer. But for them to come to us to say, here is our challenge, we're just wondering, how do we deal with being a brand in a digital age? And what better way for them to actually engage with us is through, the students who are part of a demographic that they are trying to engage with as well, that and a little bit older. And they get to use the kind of like creative mindset of those students to kind of like really think about, what are those factors that they need to now be bearing in mind in a digital age.
Sometimes I wonder, what role can design play in bringing equality in this world? For example, there are a lot of things we do kind of unconsciously, we push toward one way or the other. Like if all the models are, say, slim and tall, you may start thinking that is what is beauty. If they're all fair, you may think that's what's beauty. Like in India, for example, there is a lot of things like Nandita Das, actresses, they started doing a lot of things like black is beautiful, embrace your color, etc. But I'd love to know from you, what role does design play in maybe invoking a more equitable world?
Yes, I think that for us is probably one of the most important questions of our time, and it is often what our students are engaged in and want to know about as well. And so we have many ways that we have been looking at what we've been calling inclusive pedagogy, and we've done that right across all of our subjects. So what does it look like if you are in the School of Constructed Environment and you are studying architecture, for instance? And some of that looks like, how can you build efficient, well-run housing that is equitable, but also how might the housing itself be healthy? So we have a lab that is called the Healthy Materials Lab that looks at all of the materials that are currently in the building industry that are, unhealthy for us and in some instances poisoning us, and how a lot of those building materials can often end up in low-income housing. So they have worked with New York, it's called NYCHA, it's one of the largest housing associations, to think about paint that we use in housing and how can that actually be healthier as well. And then in the School of Fashion, there's been a lot of ways in which there is real rethinking about how inclusive fashion can be, because it's been, as you've kind of like described, it's been premised on a size 4 European body, typically, as the standard for the runway, and a size 6, and that's US sizing, size 6, shake our heads, size 6 for fit models. That is the standard that, we kind of have inherited. And now people are starting to, push back and resist that. We actually have a program and a lab that has just opened or just been in the process of being developed, which is around fat fashion. When you consider, 60% of the US body is a size
8 or plus, I'm sure.
8, 10 and
10
above.
plus,
Yeah, and there's nowhere in the industry that really caters to that body, because what you have are a standard set of assumptions about bodies that when you make clothing, and if you are H&M, you might put a few larger sizes, but your patterns that you are actually developing them from were originally made for a certain small
body.
And it's all they've done is expand it. They've not really thought about, the biomechanics of a differently framed body. And more we have students who are interested in how do I design for a differently sized body. So those are some of the ways that we are talking about inclusion.
Some of the things you don't even think about. The other day, one of my friends was driving a car, and a car came and hit her from behind, so she had a huge injury. She was wearing a seat belt, so she was saved, but the seat belt cut into her right breast, and she has to have a huge surgery now. And they were talking, and they said how seat belts were never meant for women, actually. They were never tested on women, because when seat belts came 30, 40, whichever years ago, they were tested on men, but nobody ever thought about if they're the right thing for a woman's body. So in fact, the seat belts, while they save your life, can actually cause a lot of injuries specifically to women. So that's why this whole thing of design taking everybody into account is extremely important. And in the same vein, how is there a cultural relevance for design? Because, as you said, a Western body design versus maybe an Eastern body design. Now you have a very eclectic, students from American to South Korean to Indian to Chinese, etc. So are you seeing the designs that are coming out have a cultural reference? Are you seeing maybe a Japanese motif? Or tell me a little bit about the cultural significance in design.
I would say this is probably one of our, areas where there's still a gap, and there's more work for us to be doing to create what I would call a culturally responsive pedagogy. I think it's what our students are interested in and want to see more of. And given that we have, across the new school, 43% of our students are international. And then if you go to, say, something like the School of Fashion, we may have up to as many as 46% of our students being international in that one school. And so, of course, their own culture always has a presence in terms of their design. But I think there are still places where, like many, colleges and universities, where the kind of Western epistemology is still the dominant canon. It's still the dominant ways in which we think about design. But I think it's beginning to shift, and some of that shift is happening because the students themselves say, this is what is important to me.
Yeah.
It is, and I see it mostly when students get to their capstone, to their thesis. They want to talk about their history.
Yeah.
They want to talk about their heritage at an important inflection point in their college careers.
You know, I want to talk a little bit about you. You have a Jamaican, you have a British, you have an American, you have like a little bit of all these things. Where did your interest in design start, and where was that? How did that happen?
Where it started was I'm one of 5. I have 4 younger sisters. So you can imagine trying to kind of like clothe all of us, and this was pre-H&M. There was no Zara, there was no H&M. I think in the UK there was C&A. That was the only store. But of course my mum couldn't afford to buy all of us shop-bought dresses. And I do remember there was one period of time where there's myself and my next sister. There's about 18 months between the two of us, so we typically were dressed similarly. And then my 3 following sister, there's literally about just a pregnancy between each of them. And those 3 used to be dressed the same. So I remember going with my mum. We had, first of all, she learned to sew, and she took me to her classes with her. I'm not quite sure why, but I did go with her. And then we used to have clothes made by a woman. And I remember going to her house, and she had an industrial machine, so all machinery that I'd never seen before. And I used to think, wow, there's something really fascinating about this, and that we could, have a, lovely piece of fabric, and then we'd go back and pick up a dress from her, and it would be well made. It looked like it could have been bought from a shop, and that was important at that time, because you wanted to make sure that you could have something that was shop bought that we couldn't really afford. So I think it really came. It came from there, and I think I grew up also in a period of time when we took domestic science, and so I learned to sew. And for me, some of that was like, again, pre-shop bought things. You went clubbing on a Friday, you made your outfit that week. Yeah. So that was it. It came from there. I loved dancing. And I loved okay, I got to have a new outfit to go to the club for that week. So I just followed what my mum did and started, making some of my own clothes.
So the Yvonne we are talking about, for whom the mother made your clothes, and I presume you're not from a, rich family. You're from a very regular family. Yeah. To the Yvonne who's running the Parsons School of Design, who dresses like this now, and who many fashion designers know, there's been a journey of that Yvonne. How do you relate to your friends from that side? I mean, do you feel that your exposure, etc., created a new language that makes it difficult to deal with somebody who's not from there, or are there different sets of friends for different things?
Yeah, I probably have. I'm lucky in that I have, a huge network that is in, the UK and Europe. And then I have a great network of folks that are in the US. And I come from a working class family. So, how you treat people is always important to me. There are some days, though, when I walk out of my office and my office is on Fifth Avenue between 13th and 14th Street. Sorry, 12th and 13th Street. And if you walk, up Fifth Avenue and then look up, you can see the Empire State Building. And there are those moments when I cannot believe, like this 10-year-old kid from Scott Holmes School, I cannot believe it. And it's been just sheer hard work. Yeah. And I don't forget people, and I don't treat people less than because of wherever I have, perceived to have arrived at. None of us have arrived anywhere.
And also, Yvonne, and at least for me, when living in America, it's been one of the most amazing experiences for me in terms of going from here to a place where, this is in the 80s, where I felt I could study anything, I could do anything. There's an amazing thing that offers. And at the same time, there is a very racist, very subtle, especially in certain circles, things are very subtle. And sometimes you wonder, am I really at this table, or am I at this table for a check mark, etc. So tell me a little bit about, for you, being an African, not African American, but African British, I guess. Because one of the things I've had a lot of people talk about is, say, for example, somebody who's a Jamaican who's living in America. They don't think of them as a second-class citizen, but an African American feels like a second-class citizen. So there is this, the race plays a really big role because it's visual, right? People can look at me and say, you're brown, you're Indian, you're black. It's nothing where you come from, but it's visual. So have you felt at times, do I really belong here? Am I just at this table to fulfill some qualification?
That is a really, I think, important and poignant question, because I don't know if sometimes that feeling, does it ever leave one? Do you always live with it as a kind of a consciousness? I think you do, but you don't let it get in the way. Okay. And then, yes, there are times where, somebody reached out to me, a headhunter for a role somewhere, and I was a little suspicious, but I chatted with them. And one of the things that I said was, I don't want to be your diversity hire.
Yeah.
And search companies, they're cute because they've got their own statistics. They've got to check certain things off. They've got to demonstrate that the search has been sufficiently expansive and that they have at least engaged with certain kinds of demographics. So, it's not that I'm looking, but I've started to say at the beginning of anything, I refuse to be your diversity hire.
Yeah.
So I'm just very, very clear about that.
Yeah.
I have enough kind of expertise and merit, and that's what I should be judged upon and considered.
And I truly believe that the diversity card plays only up to a certain level. But if you're running an institute, if you're in a place of importance, it doesn't work. Nobody will give a job for the diversity card, at least that. And I have to share this, that when I was in America, when I was working, my father was visiting me and we were talking, and I said the same thing, like, sometimes I feel, am I at this, first of all, most women have this imposter syndrome, right? Like, am I really this good? So I'm like, I'm getting all these promotions here, I'm working with the CEO and stuff, and do I really deserve it? And did they make a mistake in this or whatever? So my dad, something that said that was very, very insightful. He said, it doesn't matter, you have a seat at the table. Now don't question why I am here. What are you going to do with it? I thought that was such a profound insight that, okay, fine, they might have taken me as a diversity thing, or like the one brown, short Indian woman who's yelling from that corner, let's put her in the front or whatever. But now I have a seat at the table, what will I do about it? So I really have to say that what you have done with the school and how much you are loved. You know, one of the things about having Yvonne here is that we keep getting phone calls. We want to host her. We want her here. We want her there. So I feel like a bouncer saying, nope, she cannot be there. No, she cannot be there. So she's super popular with the design crowd. So what I thought I'll do is we have about 20 minutes, 15 minutes. If we don't mind, if we can get another chair on the table, not chair on the table, chair on the stage. We'll have Leanne back here. And please, if any of you have any questions for either one of them, please raise your hand. Great. And can we give a mic to, can you put your hand up, please, whoever wanted to ask it. The gentleman in the second row put his hand up first, so give it to him, and then the gentleman in the front. Please come. Go ahead. What's your name and what's your question?
Yeah, so I'm Manoj. I come from Udupi, the coastal part of Karnataka. So I'm co-founder at Cognimuse. We help startups build MVPs in days. So since you are in India, and I come from Tier 2, Tier 3 cities, so my question for you is, with India's vast and diverse population, what is the current state of art? Studies done on inclusive design philosophy specific to this country. Given that behaviors and needs vary across different regions, how should I approach designing, let's say, mobile applications for users such as farmers or cooks or maids in rural India?
Yeah.
The question I'm asking is because technology like AI is moving at a very fast pace, and the users on the other side, the design plays a major role in between. And if we kind of work on this area, then these technologies can actually make a lot of changes in rural Indias, right? So
Yeah.
what are we thinking, and what is the state of art that's been happening?
I would like to answer, but I'd like either one of you, maybe for you, Leanne, to talk about how do we have design adapt to diversity? You know, in terms of if somebody's a farmer, what kind of design do you need to do versus somebody who's a pharmacist? So say.
Thank you for the question. I'm going to say, you know, in research, there have been different traditions, and the tradition that I'm from, I trained as a neuroscientist, kind of aligns more with some engineering, and it hasn't always been as responsive as you'd like. There's often this, oh, gee, I have got a good idea, like alone in my lab or with a small group of people, like I can design this for. And that is exactly the wrong perspective. And actually, I've learned from design that participatory design, you know, engaging groups, and not just, you know, once, but repeatedly over the process. I've seen this work very well in game design, but in other domains. So unfortunately, the answer that I have to suggest for you is hard, that you really need to do the work in the communities. You need to work with. You need to do a lot of interviewing, needs finding, engaging with these different groups, and hopefully can find some like core thing that works, that can be shared, but likely solutions are going to be a little bit different for the different groups, and that will emerge from your engagement with them.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to that, and echoing what Leanne has just said in relation to, you know, participatory action research. And I'm thinking of, we have a student who graduated from our MS in Strategic Design and Management, and his research project was around how to support Indian cotton farmers. And so everything he did, first of all, you know, when you go in and you are working on the basis of participatory action research, it's very much about how do you position yourself in the community. You cannot position yourself as being here and they are there, because they are the experts. And so it was, you know, through qualitative research, it was first of all really understanding their problems, and looking at what would be a reasonable solution. And some of it was based on how do you deal with the kind of historical aspect of the way that I think seeds have been modified, but there are also original, you know, ways in which, cotton seeds have been developed over time that many of the Indian farmers have a deep knowledge about. So he had an appreciation of that. And really what he was trying to do was find a very positive way to be able to support the Indian farmers. So very much coming from, he was a graduate from the Strategic Design and Management. So there you go,
Yeah.
Strategic Design and Management. But the design is the middle piece of that, that, you know, blends both the design thinking and the strategy in terms of like finding an outcome and a solution.
I think, you know, the most important thing you have to remember is design comes out of understanding your customer. What is easy for them? What is intuitive for them? Actually, we had Susanna Muthoot yesterday, and they cater to the you know, daily wage workers, you know, giving loans against gold and things like that. And she said the first thing they do in their family is that you have to just go work and visit all the people for years. You work just at that level. So it gives you such an understanding of the customer. What they understood is that to create a saving behavior in people, somebody who can save maybe 5 rupees a day, 10 rupees a day, if you just say save 10 rupees, they will not do it. What they started doing is they say you put this 10 rupees toward buying 5 gram, you know, half a gram of gold. So every day they put 10 rupees, and by the end of it, they bought half a gram of gold, and they're starting already for the next half a gram of gold. So the point is they had to spend a lot of time understanding their customer, saying for them, they will do anything to save for gold, but they don't care about saving for money. Because the minute you save for money, the husband will take it from you and drink and come home. So I think the humans and all these big words that we use, it's truly about understand your customer. Spend time with them, what's easy for them. So your visual design has to map to what they understand. Yeah, go ahead.
Good afternoon all. I am Dr. Muralidhar Reddy. I teach management in a business school called as Cambridge Institute of Technology. And I also run an incubation and innovation center in my campus. So I have thanks to Ivan, I have a beautiful version of talking about the neurodiversity. And I have 2.2 million people in India who are neurodiverse. And there is a separate wings, thanks to American companies, which are doing hiring separately for those people. And we have placed some 3 students last year because of that in Cognizant. Okay, now coming to the question or what I have is now, in my class where I have 60 people, India is always a diverse country, right? I have from 16 states. Each state is one country, what we always call, because our cultures are different, our traditions are different, our societies are different. Now, when I teach these people a concept, it may be a design thinking to the basic knowledge. To take an example, how to deal with these 60 individuals differently and how to curate the programs differently for these 60 students in a classroom is what I would like to know. If at all you have some mechanism, really it will be very helpful to me. And at the same time, the behavioral problems in country are increasing to the core. Suppose I have a single daughter in my home, almost 16 hours she is all alone at home. 9 o'clock she goes to school, at 3:30 she is back. We are back at home only at 7 o'clock or 8 o'clock. We hardly spend 2-3 hours. And how do these behavioral changes impact their mindset, and how do as a parents we overcome them, and how do we intervene in their behavioral upbringing?
So we're 2 different questions we have. So maybe answer, one is diverse students in a class, how do you teach all of them? And secondly, with the current generation, and there's a difference between our generations, how do we make sure we have a more inclusive family relationships?
Yep. Thank you. I guess I wanted to say something that didn't fit or come across in my 15 minutes, is that neurodiversity is one way of describing things, but there are individuals who have challenges that I would say aren't well described by the neurodiversity model. In fact, I and my colleagues are trying to work on a different model of support, because if you, quite frankly, can't speak, toilet yourself, you know, you can't live an independent life, there are other sets of things we're not necessarily talking about the same. So there's a wide range, but within the realm of children who are with perhaps light support, can be in a standard classroom, how do we engage them? And I think that this is something that we must figure out, because there are more and more children with unique needs. And my answer at the university level perhaps doesn't track down, is that we need to actually find more mentors who are not teachers. There are tons of staff, they're adults, they actually aren't necessarily student facing, but they could be. You know, they're caring adults who are part of the ecosystem. And how do we pair people up so that there's more sort of eyes on, checking in, the auntie? So how are you doing, right? Because when folks aren't faring well, then we magnify problems that, you know, could have just been differences with support, and they become mental health challenges. So I'm afraid that those challenges are going to be human and just need more people. But thinking about it from the way of how do we activate available communities so we have more people, how do we, and there's even some research on this, how do you take children who are, you know, uniquely socially adept or high flyers in their classroom, what have you, and say, hey, you know, this child over here is struggling socially. I want you to spend some time with them in recess and introduce them, make sure that actually works. There is research on this in children in elementary school in the playground. I mean, so there's a lot of things that we could do to try to assist, but we need to be creative, because it can't all be on the teacher, right? And yes, there's going to be differences.
And I think I think one thing you said, I think very important, is how do you create groups? Because in a class you can create a group, but you have to really think a lot of the designing of the group, that not all people who talk all the time are in the same group, not all introverts are, not all from Bihar are in one group and Madhya Pradesh are in another group. So actually how you group people is almost a science. So how can you group them so they can help each other out and understand each other, kind of a thing. And maybe to answer the thing about the children that you were talking about, is that I think one of the things, and I can say it as an Indian parent, is that Indian parents come from the point of view of, I know everything, you're just a kid. But our kids know a lot more today. The more you respect them as an equal and let them teach you something, I think there's a better relationship. So we have to wrap up our session. So I really want to, if there is one last question.
I have one question here. Yeah.
Okay, sorry, there's a light.
Sorry.
All are from this side. All are men. What's wrong? What happened to this whole side? Are we all asleep or what? Anyway.
Okay, thank you. I'm into international trade. Okay, I assist cross-border engagement and activities. Design applies to a lot with emotions and culture, right? Now, a person or a person who's trying to export or do activities with international trade, okay, does not understand the culture and ethos of the other countries, right? How do you involve, because whatever you just spoke about creating groups or mixing people from other places, how do you see mixing people from different locations, different regions, so that there is exchange of design thoughts, design activities, so that we from India can manufacture whatever we are manufacturing today here, but with respect to their culture, so that our trade increases around it.
Yeah, that is an excellent question, and you know, I see a lot in that area where you know, if I think of other work that I have done, mainly with like artisan groups, and not only artisan groups, but if you want to be operating at a international trade level, it does require you to have a different kind of curiosity about who you are going to be selling to. So, I would do a project with a group of women who were Mongolian Kashmir women business owners. And of course, what they want to be able to do, they want to sell to wider areas of Europe. But if your context is the place that you live and you design from that perspective, it's not necessarily going to get you to that that other space that you actually want to
just adding there
in.
itself, because I'll give the use case itself. We have a lot of artisans doing a lot of handicrafts products here, but it becomes difficult for us to sell to South America because their culture does not accept our style of designs, right? But we have to train these people to think their possibilities. There needs a global vision of exchange of design thoughts.
I think that's where collaboration comes in place. And I think one thing she said that's very important is that who is selling to who? If I am selling to the other person, it's on me to understand them. It's not on them to understand me. So I think there's that understanding has to be there. And the more, if suppose some people from there come collaborate with people here. In fact, we did it with some people from California, is that, like a lot, like this kind of a design, people won't wear it. It's too bright for people. But you know what? Something like this could be a wall hanging. Something like this could be something else. And I can't be offended about it. So if you collaborate, and actually we had somebody from there come spend time with artisans here, and blend it in and create a whole bunch of home furnishings with the same textile. So I think collaboration is very, very important, and understanding who you are selling to is extremely important. With that, so last comments from Sangeeta and then we'll wrap up. Can you give her the mic, please?
It's actually a comment and not really a question, because we've been talking so much about collaboration. So when Lakshmi, you say that we should understand the person we are selling to, I think it's also important there should be reverse integration. So for someone like Yvonne, who is in this strong position of power to say that it should be a reverse, also to understand for somebody what goes into a woven fabric, which is hand woven but can be applied into a machine-made jacket. So it is not only one-way responsibility, it should be two-way.
I agree. I think what I mean to say is that each person should feel it's their responsibility to understand the other and not expect them to understand you. And the same thing should happen on the other side also. That's when amazing things happen. A lot of times problems are there because of sense of entitlement, that you should understand me, why should I understand you? It's both responsibility. So with that, I think whether it's parents and children or seller and the buyer or whatever it is, the more it's a bilateral, truly bilateral communication, we'll be in a great shape. With that, I really want to thank both Yvonne and Leanne, who made the trip from US to here just for being with all of you today. So thanks for coming all the way.
Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together and let's give it up for our dignitaries present on stage. I want to especially take this moment and thank you for joining us out here and sharing with us your thoughts, your opinions on how we can have a collaborative effort and join together to reimagine growth, to carve out solutions based on a higher understanding of our customers that benefits both parties. Ma'am, if I could request you to kindly do the honors and present this token of appreciation to Ms. Watson. Please put your hands together once again, and thank you to the three of you for joining us out here once again and being a part of Invest Karnataka 2025. It's an honor, a pleasure and a privilege to have your presence out here. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us. We resume with our next session at 4 p.m. this evening. We'll see you for the next session then.
been waiting.